It's time for Recipe of the Day. I have most definitely gotten some flack on social media for posting a video for this recipe, but I swear by it and I think it's amazing. And if you have a loved one who likes a well-done steak or a medium well steak, you don't have to roll your eyes at them. You don't have to make any mean TikTok style comments about it. You can just follow these instructions and make them smile, which is what I always want for my loved ones, right? A nice big smile and a big hug and a thank you, mom, and happy people eating the food that I cooked for them, you know? And before I start, I'm just going to say that some of what I'm talking about applies to steaks of other doneness levels too. So you're going to learn something probably about how to cook steak as I'm talking, whether you want a well done steak or not. Okay, so if you do want a well done steak, first, what kind of steak should you choose? I believe firmly that you should choose something with some marbling. You want a ribeye, a New York strip, or a chuck eye for single serving steaks. Having said that, one of the family members in my house who likes their steak well done does not like fatty steaks and they prefer like a filet mignon. That is not my recommendation. It is, I think, a little bit tough and it is hard to make that delicious and juicy and tender when it's well done. I mean, if you follow the method that I'm going to be telling you about, it's still going to be better than if you do it some other way, but it's not the choice that I would make. If you are doing more of a large steak that you would slice and divide among several people, then you have some other options. I actually really like doing that for my family, and I've told you about it before because some people like them well done, and I like mine more kind of like a medium. If I do one of those big steaks, often they're different thicknesses, like the ends are thinner than the middle, which will be thicker. And so those ends are going to be nice and well done for them, and the middle is going to be more medium for me. So that is a great option. If you're doing that, then you want the tri-tip or the flank steak. Those are both going to work really well there. Flat meat will work. You can do the skirt steak, but it tends to be a little bit more of even thickness. So in that case, if you're making that for a family that has some well done steak likers, the whole steak is probably going to end up well done. So those are the options. And then in terms of thickness, you don't want to go more than 1.5 inches thick. An inch is actually ideal. And that's just because as we're trying to get that steak well done in the middle, the outside is in contact with heat and it risks burning and really drying out on the outside before the inside gets there. So if it's too thick, you're going to have that problem. 1 inch, 1.5 inches is perfect. Next is to season the steak well. That is 1/4 teaspoon of salt on each side of the steak, less if it's a small filet mignon. Like I'm talking if it's like a New York strip, you want about 1/4 teaspoon of salt on each side. And then I highly recommend that you do the dry brine on these. Whatever we can do to bring flavor and juiciness into the steak is going to help when we're cooking it well done. I mean, it's always helpful, but it's really going to help here. So what I recommend is get a rack, put a plate or a sheet pan under it, put your steak on the rack, salt both sides, and then put it into the fridge, ideally for 8 hours. You know, I've done the testing on this and 8 hours is the sweet spot. More than that doesn't seem to do anything bad. It just doesn't improve anything. Less than that is okay. I've had success even just doing 1 hour, 4 hours, but 8 hours is best. And then you're going to take it out of the fridge for 30 minutes before you cook it. You might be saying, Christine, everybody knows that you take the steaks out of the fridge for 30 minutes before you cook them. But I think people get it wrong most of the time. You shouldn't be doing that if you want your steak rare or medium rare, because in that case, you actually want the steak as cold as possible so that it takes longer for it to get to the desired temperature so that the outside of your steak is in contact with the skillet for longer so it can get a crust. Now, I learned this from listening to Lynn Rossetto Casper's podcast, The Splendid Table. She's not the host anymore, but she used to be. That is who I learned this from, and I've tried it. She is right. Well, she's right about everything, you know, but she is right about this. If you want your steak rare or medium, you want a cold steak. If you want your steak medium well or well done, then you want the room temperature steak because you want it to take less time for it to come up to temperature so that the outside doesn't dry out. You see what I mean? So if you were one of those people who was like, Christine, everybody knows that. I don't think everybody does. I think they're kind of doing it wrong and they take their steaks out no matter what temperature they want them to be eventually. Only take them out 30 minutes before if you want a more well done steak. Okay, next, we are going to start these steaks in a skillet, but then we're finishing them in the oven, but not in a hot oven. So quite often people do a technique where you start the steak in the skillet, you do one side, then you flip it over and transfer the skillet immediately to your hot oven where it sears on the bottom because it's in contact with the skillet, but sort of cooks more evenly throughout and quickly. That is a thing that you can do. It doesn't work great here because, again, we're going to be overcooking the outside of the steak. Instead, preheat your oven to 275 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're going to sear the outside on the stove over high temperature and then let it finish low and slow. Gentler cooking is going to be best so we get a more moist, more tender steak. Okay, so get an oven-safe skillet out. You're heating that over medium-high heat, and I highly recommend that you use some kind of oven-safe thermometer here. I love a probe thermometer with a digital reader. The digital reader has a magnet and it goes outside of the oven while the probe is inside the oven. And then you can see the temperature while things are cooking without having to open the oven. And the great thing about this for here is we are cooking these steaks to well done, but we don't want them to go beyond overdone. We want to get as close to exactly that well done temperature as possible and no more. And so if you know the exact temperature of your steak, you're going to be more precise with that and it is going to pay off. So get that probe thermometer in there. Your oven safe skillet is heating over medium high heat. Add in a tablespoon of cooking oil. I use grapeseed oil for this. It just has a slightly higher smoke point than olive oil does. And so 1 tablespoon of cooking oil in there. When it's shimmering and hot, add that steak in and cook it until it's well browned underneath. It's going to be about 3 to 4 minutes. Then flip it over and do well browned on the other side. So it's still on the stove for this part, another 3 to 4 minutes. Then you're going to transfer the skillet with the steak in it into your 275 degree oven. And you are watching that digital reader while it's in there. And you're going to take your steak out when it's 5 degrees below the temperature you want. So if you want a medium well steak, you're taking it out at 145. If you want a well done steak, you're taking it at 155. As soon as you take it out of the oven, transfer the steak out of the skillet onto a plate or onto a cutting board. You want it to stop being in contact with the heat at that point. Now we have a chance to add a little bit of moisture and flavor into the steak. What you do is get a tablespoon of butter and slice it thinly and then arrange those slices on top of the steak while it's resting for 5 minutes. The butter is going to melt down into the steak, add some delicious flavor and moisture. And in those 5 minutes that the steak is resting, it's going to come up to the desired temperatures of 150 degrees Fahrenheit for medium well or 160 degrees Fahrenheit for well done. And that is it is juicy. It is delicious. It is fully flavored with that salt. Oh, you could use a flavored butter if you wanted more different flavors in there. I'm going to link to my steak butter recipe. It's got herbs and garlic and a little bit of cognac in there. Just a nice punch of flavor at the end. I do also recommend that you consider serving a well done steak with a sauce. It's just going to help if any part of that is a little bit dry. I will link to my homemade horseradish sauce for you. Also, like a chimichurri is very classic with steak. Delicious. Garlic butter would be really good here. You could even make like a pan gravy. I have a steak and gravy recipe I'll link to. Make like a pan gravy to serve with this. So those are all really good options. I think your loved ones who like well done steaks are going to be so happy with you. You're going to get so many thank yous and smiles and hugs. I promise. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there, or find it in our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/recipeOTD. And hey, just a quick note. I'm on a recording hiatus right now, so for the next little while, I'm replaying episodes from the archives, including this one. If you heard me mention a holiday, a season, or something going on in my life that seemed a bit off, that's why. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you're enjoying these older episodes. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, cookfor2.us, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.